From our Washington, D.C. studios, this is the Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum, I'm Hena Zuberi. U.S. confirms another American killed by Israeli settlers and urges Israel to investigate amid rising violence in the West Bank. This and more are coming up in today's news, so stay tuned. For more than 600 days, the Israeli flag flew over Broome County Correctional Facility in New York by the order of Sheriff Fred Akshar. It has now been taken down. New York state law forbids a foreign flag from flying over public property. The nonprofit Veterans for Peace, or VFP, notified Akshar on July 29th that it would file a lawsuit if the Israeli flag was not taken down within 10 days. Jack Gilroy of VFP wrote in a Facebook post, "It is not correct to have a foreign flag, especially a flag representing the greatest murderers in our time. And that is, of course, the flag of Israel, a disgrace. To have our country praise Israel for murderous things, not the way to go." 6 days after the lawsuit was filed, Akshar, a strong supporter of President Donald Trump, relented. The organization is now asking county officials to apologize to the general public for the flag display. Broome County is one of the leading penal camps for immigrants in New York State. Renowned Palestinian American scholar Rashid Khaledi has canceled his planned fall course at the Columbia University, protesting growing restrictions on free speech. The retired professor of Middle East history says that the university's recent policies, especially the adoption of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism, makes it impossible to teach honestly. Khaledi argues that the new definition dangerously equates criticism of Israel and Zionism with anti-Semitism, silencing academic debate. In an open letter published in The Guardian, Khaledi accused the university of bowing to pressure from the Trump administration. He said university authorities are showing contempt for students and faculty, creating an atmosphere of fear and censorship, particularly around Palestinian rights and academic freedom. Khaledi, who holds Columbia's Edward Said Chair, was set to return as a special lecturer. Columbia has not yet responded to Khaledi's letter. The United States has confirmed the death of another American citizen at the hands of Israeli settlers in the occupied West Bank and is urging Israel to investigate. Palestinian American Khamis Ayad died from smoke inhalation last Thursday after Israeli settlers torched cars and homes in Silwad village. State Department spokesperson Tammy Bruce says that ensuring the safety of Americans is a top priority. She called the situation violent and dynamic and confirmed that the U.S. is pushing for a full investigation. This comes weeks after Israeli settlers beat another Palestinian American, Saifullah Musallat, to death. His family said settlers blocked emergency responders for hours. Musallat was the 7th American killed in the West Bank since January 2022. Israeli settlers have killed more than 1,000 Palestinians and injured over 7,000 amid rising Israeli army and settler violence in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem. Washington says it will continue pressing Israel to investigate all such cases. Free Palestine activists has set up camps outside top U.S. media offices in Washington, D.C. for the past 2 weeks in protest of Israel's genocide in Palestine. Demonstrators gather at 400 North Capitol Street, home to NBC, Fox News, MSNBC, The Hill, and others. They hold signs reading "Stop Media Complicity in Genocide" and "Media Lies, Gaza Dies." Organizer Hizami Barmada accuses major media outlets of bias and complicity in reporting in Israel's genocide in Gaza. Barmada says for 22 months, Gaza has faced relentless attacks. She criticizes the media's use of passive phrases like people are starving instead of directly naming Israel as the cause. Protesters say such language hides the truth and erases Palestinian voices. In the past 24 hours, Israeli soldiers have killed at least 135 Palestinians, including 87 people waiting for aid in attacks across Gaza. At least 31 people have been killed since dawn on Wednesday. Among them were a family of 5 and a 6-month-old baby. A truck carrying aid overturned in central Gaza, killing 25 people. Officials say that the Israeli army forced it onto an unsafe route. Israeli soldiers shot dead 5 more Palestinians while waiting for aid in Rafah. Starvation deaths also have risen, with 5 more reported, bringing the total to 193 people. Israel only allowed 85 aid trucks to enter Gaza yesterday amid a blockade that has strangled the territory for 18 years. Since May 27th, Israeli soldiers and American mercenaries have killed over 1,500 aid seekers and injured more than 11,000 near Israeli and U.S.-run distribution centers. The UN and EU have slammed Israeli reported plan to fully occupy Gaza, calling it a dangerous and unacceptable provocation. Israel's genocide in Gaza has killed over 65,000 Palestinians so far, mostly women, children, and the elderly. The Trump administration is planning to replicate Florida's controversial Alligator Alcatraz migrant detention center across the country. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem told CBS the facility, located in a swamp near a runway, will serve as a model for faster deportations. She said new detention centers may be built near airport runways in Arizona, Nebraska, and Louisiana to cut costs and boost efficiency. She claimed these sites are much better than local jails that Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, currently uses. Experts warn that the model bypasses due process and isolates detainees from legal help. Human Rights Watch says detainees at Alligator Alcatraz suffer overcrowding, freezing cells, medical neglect, and poor hygiene. Many immigrants with legal status have been deported without hearings. Trump imposes new tariffs on Indian goods to 50%, citing national security and India's ties to Russia. Details are coming up next.
We can save a lot of people. I mean, some of those kids that's real starvation stuff. I see it. And you can't fake that. We can save a lot of people. I mean, some of those kids that's real starvation stuff. I see it. And you can't fake that.
President Donald Trump has imposed an additional 25% tariff on Indian goods, raising total duties to 50%. The decision, announced via executive order, punishes India for continuing to import Russian oil, which Trump says helps finance Moscow's war in Ukraine. Trump accused India of strenuous and obnoxious trade barriers and warned similar penalties for other nations buying Russian oil directly or indirectly. The tariff on Indian goods now exceeds that on China and Pakistan. The move follows Trump's earlier warning and comes just hours after he criticized India. The executive order cites national security threats and invokes emergency powers under existing sanctions law. Indian officials said all imports are driven by market necessity and pointed out that many Western nations also maintain trade ties with Russia. Trump's order gives U.S. officials the authority to expand tariffs, adjust rules, and recommend penalties on other countries if needed. The tariffs take effect on September 17th. More than 200 people have been arrested across Pakistan on August 5th during protests marking 2 years of imprisonment of former Prime Minister Imran Khan. Most detentions occurred in Rawalpindi and Lahore, where police cited violations of protest bans. Opposition party Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, or PTI spokesperson Zulfiqar Bukhari claimed that more than 200 were detained in Lahore. Demonstrators had gathered to support Khan, who was ousted in 2022 after a no-confidence vote and jailed in 2023. Khan, who has denied all accusations, faces dozens of cases, including charges of terrorism and leaking state secrets. The protest echoed the 2023 unrest, when Khan's arrest triggered violent demonstrations and attacks on military sites, followed by a crackdown on his party. Pakistan's Election Commission then disqualified 9 opposition lawmakers, including leaders Omar Ayub and Shibli Faraz, after a court sentenced them to 10 years over their alleged roles in those protests. Doctors Without Borders has halted operations in 2 South Sudan counties after a second staff member was kidnapped in less than a week. The International Medical Group, also known as MSF, announced the suspension Tuesday. Gunmen reportedly stopped an MSF convoy during an evacuation between Morobo and Yi River counties. They abducted the team leader but let the rest go. This came just 4 days after a health ministry worker was briefly kidnapped from an MSF ambulance on the same route. Ferdinand Ate, MSF's head of mission, condemned the attacks. He said while MSF is committed to helping staff, safety must come first. This is the second time in 3 months MSF has scaled back its services in the region. MSF says services will remain suspended for at least 6 weeks. Japan observed 80 years since the U.S. atomic bombing of its cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki on Wednesday, with a silent prayer and a solemn ceremony. Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba, Hiroshima Mayor Kazumi Matsui, and international guests paid tribute in Hiroshima to more than 200,000 Japanese people killed by the United States in the 2 cities. Survivors like Shingo Nato and Satoshi Tanaka shared harrowing memories of burnt bodies, lost families, and lives forever scarred. Matsui warned against the growing global arms race and reliance on nuclear weapons, calling it a betrayal of history's tragic lessons. Survivors of nuclear aggression urged world leaders to ratify the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, which is already backed by more than 70 nations. Israel, a non-declared nuclear power, refuses UN oversight and recently attacked Iran to block its nuclear program. The message of the nuclear survivors of Hiroshima also resonates with flashpoints such as South Asia, which poses grave nuclear risks. Nuclear-armed neighbors India and Pakistan have fought wars over Kashmir and remain on edge. Experts warn that a single miscalculation, as seen in the 2019 Pulwama Balakot episode, could spiral into global catastrophe. Bangladesh's interim leader Muhammad Yunus has announced a roadmap for democratic transition in the country. He said national elections will be held next February, marking the first since Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina was ousted a year ago. On the anniversary of the 2024 student-led revolution, the capital Dhaka saw rallies, prayers, and concerts celebrating what many call the country's second liberation. Yunus said he would ask the Election Commission to hold polls before Ramadan. He promised free, peaceful, and inclusive elections, stressing the need for reforms and warning of threats from Hasina's allies. Hasina, who's accused of human rights abuses, fled to India after protesters stormed her palace in August 2024. She refuses to return for trial. The July declaration, a 28-point reform charter from the uprising, was read out by Yunus. Families of slain protesters joined events across the capital, guarded by police and armored vehicles. African leaders who gathered in Ghana's capital, Accra, on Tuesday discussed the growing health funding crisis. At the Continental Health Sovereignty Summit, former Nigerian President Olusegun Obasanjo said Africa needs health without aid. He proposed an African health fund backed by a tourist airline tax. The summit, called by Ghana's President John Mahama, came after a 40% drop in development aid, with the steepest cuts since President Donald Trump took office in January. Mahama announced a presidential task force on global health governance to amplify Africa's voice and reform outdated systems. He said the U.S. funding halt has crippled Ghana's health delivery model. Ghana has since uncapped its health insurance scheme and launched a medical trust fund. A new tool, Sustain, will help nations map and mobilize funding from all sources. WHO Chief Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus warned of a looming disaster, saying health and cuts have triggered the worst disruption since COVID-19, leaving clinics shut and care out of reach. Kmart is facing serious allegations of sourcing clothes from factories tied to forced labor in China. An Australian Uyghur group has filed a lawsuit in the federal court demanding documents to determine if Kmart knowingly used suppliers linked to the Chinese-occupied East Turkestan region. Uyghurs reportedly face state-sponsored forced labor in the region. The Australian Uyghur Tangang Women's Association says two suppliers on Kmart's 2024 and 2025 factory list raise red flags. Kmart claims it follows strict ethical sourcing standards and runs audits to monitor labor conditions. But the group accuses Kmart of misleading the public and breaching consumer laws. Lawyers say this case is a first-of-its-kind push for corporate accountability in Australia. Unlike the U.S., Australia hasn't banned imports from the region, raising concerns about weak enforcement on modern slavery. Kmart says it's disappointed by the lawsuit after a year of discussions. Scientists in Australia have made a breakthrough that could help fight deadly snake bites. Researchers at the University of Queensland discovered that Australian skinks have evolved natural defenses against venom. Their muscles are protected by tiny changes in a key receptor that venom usually targets to cause paralysis. Researchers say understanding these molecular defenses could lead to better treatments for snake bites in humans. The study, published in the International Journal of Molecular Sciences, also found skinks use sugar molecules and amino acid changes to block toxins. That's all from our Washington, D.C. studios. Thank you for watching Muslim News. We are a community channel dedicated to bringing you stories you can trust. Please like, share, and subscribe to our content. You can also comment to let us know what you think of our coverage. You can donate now by visiting muslimnetwork.tv/donate. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum.